principal investigators of Bermuda's national ACE study, which I believe is still the only national ACE study we've had in the whole Caribbean. And so my first question is, why did you decide, as in your team, to undertake this study?
Sure, and thanks for having me. So what we knew is that one of the biggest single factors that were facing children in the US, we wanted to know if it was the same for Bermuda. And Folletti and Anda did the largest study on adverse childhood experiences. What we were finding in the work that we were doing is many of the children were coming in that had been abused. There was neglect in the family. There was family dysfunction. There were all of these individual pieces of information, but there wasn't any real framework for understanding it. And what the Folletti and Anda study did, it gave us an understanding and a framework for really looking at and understanding ACEs, and also thinking about the young people that we were seeing in the agency where I worked at the time. And so we wanted to replicate that study and to explore if, in fact, we were finding the same results, we would get the same results that they found in the US study. And so the purpose really was to raise awareness on ACEs, to really give a framework for all of these, individual mental health issues, family dysfunction, abuse, neglect, violence, all of those individual issues, but to give it a framework and to raise awareness on ACEs, to educate the public about ACEs, and then share ways that we can reduce the impact of ACEs or trauma on children's health, and help them to thrive in the face, of adversity.
I noticed that you focus on the original 10 ACs that were covered in Dr. Anders and Felix's study, but you also added three that expanded ACs that are
Yeah.
unique to. Why did
Yeah.
you do that? And what were these?
So, the purpose was to expand on the original study and to also make it culturally relevant to the community. And so, issues around race were important, issues of road safety, traffic accidents, all of these things were important. And so we made a point to bring in questions that were relevant to our community.
Makes sense. Can you please talk about the data collection process, including how you engaged key stakeholders and secured participation?
Sure. So initially, what we did is in 2018, we had what we call a awareness raising campaign and a call to action. And so we held a 2-day conference on adverse childhood experiences, and we invited, community stakeholders, nonprofit agencies, educators, parents, donors. We invited the community to join us for this 2-day conference where we could share with them, this framework around ACEs. We also partnered with community people and agencies to not just raise awareness, but to roll out the research. We went through a rigorous survey research process, IRB process, and shared what our process was and our design. And then we created, again, we wanted to make this as accessible a survey so that people can participate. And so we created an online version as well as a printable version that people could use. We had the survey done in English as well as in Portuguese because we have a large Portuguese population on the island. And then we also piloted um, a part of the survey that included the culturally relevant questions that were very specific to Bermuda. And so then we had a soft rollout. And then by 2019, we had another conference addressing racial trauma and the economics of ACEs. At that conference, we shared some of the pilot data with the participants who included, at this time donors. We invited corporate Bermuda to attend because ACEs knows no boundaries and affects all of us, regardless of gender, race, as well as the economics of, health because of the long-term impact that ACEs can have. And so we shared some of the results from that initial rollout with the community and then continued on through 2020 to, you know, share the survey with the community and invite people to participate.
So broadly speaking, what were some of the results? Did you see, for instance, a sort of a replication of what we've seen in North America in terms of outcomes?
That's
And
exactly right. That's exactly right. We saw
yes,
it validated what we had seen in the US. We were also finding that in Bermuda.
how how did the findings shape or reshape sort of a national understanding or discourse around child abuse, domestic violence, and related issues in Bermuda?
I guess it validated that childhood adversity, including abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction, is a pervasive public health issue. Um, and, it has long-term physical consequences if not addressed. Um, it helped us to share with the public that ACEs are common and that it is just part of your story. It's not the end of your story. Having this information gives you now the tools that you can use to continue to navigate your own journey and provide the kind of interventions you need now. It helped to look at, ACEs across gender, race, economic status, and really help people to understand that, we all have ACEs and that, intervening and prevention is the key. And so knowing what your story is now, you then get to do something different.
And on the issues of prevention and intervention, were there any specific findings that led to sort of direct policy changes or program development or funding shifts
I
that
can
came as a result of this?
Yeah, I can say that the agency where I worked at the time, Family Center,
Mm.
they certainly implemented, you know, changes by integrating ACEs into their intake forms and into their programmatic work. I believe, comes incrementally and it
Right.
takes time and it takes advocacy and it takes, the ongoing conversation. And so this was really a beginning of the journey and understanding of what the information is that we have here and now how do we move forward, whether you take it into the doctor's offices, you integrate it into your schools as screenings, in charities, in non-for-profits. It really is, how do you continue on the conversation so that we don't lose sight of this? Because the issues are still there, but
Yes.
it's how we address them is really what's going to create the change.
I'm happy that like I've seen that too, that there are some organizations that are using the findings of the study to inform their work. But there is something, though, to be said, Stephanie, about how, and this happens universally, but certainly in the Caribbean, in Jamaica, for instance, we conduct so many studies. And sometimes year after year, the same studies, but we don't follow through. And I'm wondering if you'd like to say something about that, how important it is for us to be diligent in continuing this kind of work so that we get the results that we want to get.
Right. I also think, for Bermuda, this was the first time that we were really doing something, a real national study. And
Yes.
so I believe since the ACEs study, they are actually doing more localized research that is very relevant, certainly to young people, and that's critical. So I think, there's been change, and at the same time, we have to continue to carry that torch and continue to educate and continue to remind people of what the issues are and how we can address them.
Thank you. And my last question is, what advice would you offer to these wonderful islands in the Dutch Caribbean considering a national AC study, particularly in terms of cultural adaptation, resource management, and long-term impact?
Um, so one is, if you're going to do an ACEs study, which I strongly recommend, it's great to have baseline data for everybody. One is to, like we did, create a culturally relevant survey. So if you're going to mirror, a national study from abroad, also bring in what those relevant and cultural issues are, because you want to have data on that. That's really important. You want to engage your stakeholders. You want to partner and collaborate, because that's really critical and that's key in carrying out such an important study. And you want to plan for sustainability, like you said, how does this is just a beginning point. This is the catalyst that is going to begin the conversation. How do you use this now as a roadmap for, what's next now that we have this information? And then the other piece, which I think we did very well, is there's a need for trust and sensitivity to these issues. And so we had services and supports on standby for people that may have completed the study and needed to talk to somebody. You want to um, provide a level of trust that people can believe that their information is going to be taken
Mm.
with care, and it's going
Mm.
to be safeguarded, and it's private information for them, but it's also going to help, the country get the resources that they need.
Thank you very much. I did say that was the last question, but here's the last one. Um, would you be available if we do decide to take this conversation a bit further and design a study within the region to participate in those conversations going forward?
Well, certainly, this is really near and dear to my heart, this issue, and I'm certainly open to continuing the conversation and exploring, how I can be of value to the community, to the Dutch Caribbean.